The starship descended slowly toward Vexithar Prime, the grand capital of the Galactic Concordat. Lieutenant Minho stood at the observation window and watched the planet grow larger. Its 3 moons cast strange shadows across the crystalline cities below. He had been to many alien worlds before, but this one always made him feel small. Behind him, his grandmother sat quietly in a comfortable chair. Park Min-ji was 103 years old, though she looked no older than 70. Years of advanced medical treatments had kept her body strong and her mind sharp. She wore traditional Korean clothing, a simple blue hanbok that seemed out of place among the modern spaceship surroundings. Around her waist hung an ancient blade in a decorated scabbard. It was her family's ceremonial Dao Tang Zanjeom, passed down through 7 generations of her family. Minho looked at the blade and frowned slightly. "Grandmother, are you sure about bringing that?" he asked in Korean. "The council might think it is strange." Park Min-ji smiled without opening her eyes. "Strength that hides itself is no strength at all, Minho. We bring our history with us, or we bring nothing at all." The landing bay was enormous. Ships from 100 different worlds filled the massive space. The Aeliorians had sent their conquest fleet, sleek silver vessels with sharp edges that looked ready for battle. The Thalasians had brought their energy platforms, towers of crystal and light that hummed with power. The insectoid Vren had arrived in their bioorganic ships, living structures that seemed to breathe and pulse. Humans had brought 3 military vessels, which looked practical but unremarkable next to the alien craft. The council chamber was built in the center of Vexthar Prime, a structure so large it could hold 10,000 beings at once. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air was carefully controlled to be breathable for most known species. Today, only about 200 representatives sat in the Great Chamber. They sat arranged in circles based on their species and alliance groups. Minho walked with his grandmother through the corridors. He wore his military uniform, sharp and professional. She walked slowly, using a carved wooden cane that she had brought from Earth. Some of the aliens they passed stopped to stare. They had never seen a human this old before. Most humans in space were young soldiers or scientists. An elderly human grandmother was something unusual. The human delegation section was small, positioned between the Thalasians and a neutral group of traders. Commander Thrace was already there, a heavy-shouldered man with gray at his temples. He was humanity's chief military strategist, known for practical thinking and solid tactics. He nodded to Minho with respect and bowed carefully to Park Min-ji, as was proper. "Welcome, Park Min-ji," Thrace said in careful Korean. "We are honored by your presence." "I am simply here to support my grandson," she replied. "What else would I be doing?" The session began with an ancient ritual. Each species presented their leaders and their representatives. The great counselor Vexashar of the Aeliorians stood first. He was a massive reptilian being, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that caught the light like armor. His voice was deep and slow. "The Zen Collective threatens all of us," he said in the common trading language. "They are biological weapons. They adapt quickly. They feel no fear. We must meet them with strength and conquest protocols. We will attack them where they are weak and destroy them before they destroy us." The chamber hummed with agreement. The Aeliorians had fought 100 wars and won most of them. The Thalasians spoke next through their hive consciousness. Multiple crystalline beings spoke together in perfect harmony, creating a sound like singing glass. They spoke about energy weapons and power projection. They showed images of their latest technology, weapons that could level entire cities from space. They spoke with confidence about their ability to defend against any invader. The Vren presented their tactical methods. Their representative was a tall insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected light like mirrors. The Vren explained how their hive-mind coordination made them nearly impossible to defeat in organized warfare. They could think as one organism across thousands of individual soldiers. Every soldier knew what every other soldier was doing. Finally, it was humanity's turn. Min-Ho stood up, and the chamber went quiet. Humans were known for being practical and resourceful, but they were never considered a major military power. The other species listened with polite attention, but not much real interest. Min-Ho began to present humanity's defensive capabilities. They had decent weapons systems. They had good training programs. They had strategists like Commander Thrace who could analyze problems well. It was all solid, but it was not impressive compared to the technologies being shown by other species. Then Park Min-ji stood up. The whole chamber seemed surprised by the movement of the ancient human woman. She walked slowly to stand beside her grandson. Min-Ho did not know what she was going to say, but he stepped back to give her space. Park Min-ji looked across the assembled alien representatives. Her voice was old but clear. "I have lived for more than 100 years, she said in the common language, which came slowly to her but correctly. I have seen much. I have seen wars and peace. I have seen empires rise and cities fall. I will tell you something about my people." The chamber was silent. Everyone was listening now. "You speak about weapons and conquest protocols," Park Min-ji continued. "You speak about technology and power. But you have missed the most important thing about humanity. A blade that is too sacred to use in combat is a blade preserved for survival itself. We have learned something that you have not. True strength is not in the weapon. True strength is not in the power you can project. True strength is in what we refuse to become." Some of the aliens did not understand her words. Others understood them but dismissed them as philosophy, not practical strategy. Counselor Vexishar made a low sound that might have been laughter. The Thalasians returned to discussing their energy weapons. The Vren seemed uninterested. Commander Thrace looked at Park Min-ji with respect, though he did not fully understand what she meant either. Min-Ho helped his grandmother back to her seat. She sat down slowly and closed her eyes, as if she had used all her energy for one moment. Min-Ho looked at his grandmother's face and understood that she had just said something important, even if nobody in the chamber had truly heard it. The council session continued for hours. They discussed defense strategies and resource allocation. Humanity was given support roles, supply management and medical support. It was honorable work, but not the kind of work that would change the course of a war. When the session ended, the assembled species dispersed to their ships and their stations. Min-Ho and Park Min-ji walked back through the corridors in silence. Finally, Min-Ho asked, "Grandmother, do you think they understood what you said?" "Understanding comes later," she replied. "First comes the question. The answer will come when they need it most." The human delegation boarded their ship. As it lifted away from Vexthar Prime, Min-Ho looked back at the beautiful planet and wondered what was coming. He did not know then that he would soon understand exactly what his grandmother's strange words had meant. He did not know that humanity's greatest test was only 3 weeks away. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Sector 7. Border Station received the distress call at exactly 0400 hours. The Zen Collective had launched their attack without warning. Their fleet was massive, 5,000 ships that seemed to come out of nowhere. They did not follow any known patterns of warfare. They did not announce their intentions or ask for surrender. They simply attacked. The first wave of ships swept through the outer defensive lines like a storm. The crystalline Thalasian energy weapons fired continuously, bright lines of destruction filling the space between worlds. Hundreds of Zen ships exploded in brilliant flashes. But for every Zen ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear. It was as if the Zen had infinite numbers. Lieutenant Min-Ho stood in the Human Operations Center and watched the battle unfold on the tactical displays. The screens showed hundreds of red dots representing Zen forces and blue dots representing the Concordate Alliance. The red dots were growing faster than the blue dots were shrinking. Commander Thrace was on the communications channel with the main Alliance command. His voice was calm, but focused. Alliance Command, this is Sector 7 Human Command. We are maintaining position in the secondary defensive zone as assigned. We have medical and evacuation capacity ready. What are your orders? The response came back quickly. Sector 7 Command, you are to remain in support position. Do not engage primary combat operations. Prepare to receive wounded and evacuate if necessary. Minho clenched his fists. Humanity had been given the role of medical support and evacuation, the behind-the-lines position where they could help but would not be asked to do the dangerous fighting. It made sense tactically. Humans were not the strongest fighters in the Alliance, but watching his people relegated to support duties while the war raged around them filled Minho with frustration. The battle continued for hours. The Aeliorian conquest fleets advanced forward in perfect formations, but the Zen adapted quickly. When the Aeliorians used one tactic, the Zen changed their response. The insectoid Vren fought with their hive mind coordination, but somehow the Zen seemed to anticipate their movements. The Thalasians kept firing their powerful energy weapons, but the Zen had developed biological shields that could absorb the energy. By the 8th hour of battle, the situation was becoming critical. The main defensive line was pushed back by 20%. Casualties were mounting. The first human medical ships arrived and began taking on wounded. Vren soldiers with missing limbs, Thalasian beings burned by weapons, Aeliorians with deep cuts that leaked blue blood. Minho moved through the medical ship, helping where he could. He had medical training as part of his military education. He applied bandages and ran scans on alien physiology he did not fully understand. Around him, human medical personnel worked frantically to save lives. Then the communications system brought urgent news. A major Aeliorian battle group had been surrounded. They had only hours before they would be completely destroyed. The Thalasian response group was too far away to help. The Vren were engaged in their own defensive battles. Commander Thrace made a decision. He called Minho to the command center. I am requesting permission from Alliance Command to deploy our support forces in a rescue operation, Thrace said. But I want to hear your thoughts first. Minho looked at the tactical display. The Aeliorian forces were surrounded by Zen ships. Any rescue attempt would have to fight through those ships. Humans were not trained for major combat operations. They had practical weapons, but nothing like the advanced technology of the other species. The mission would be dangerous, and success was not guaranteed. We can try, Minho said, but we will take casualties. Many of us might not come back. I know, Thrace said, but those Aeliorians will certainly die without help. And if we lose the Aeliorian forces, the entire defensive line could collapse. Everything could fail. Thrace transmitted his request to Alliance Command. There was a moment of silence. Then permission came back. Approved. Use whatever force is necessary. What happened next shocked everyone, including the humans themselves. The human rescue force that Thrace assembled was not built on advanced weaponry or superior technology. Instead, it was built on something that other species had not thought to use: human adaptability and human creativity. Minho led a team of soldiers in smaller, faster ships that took unexpected routes through the battle zone. They were not trying to fight the Zen directly. Instead, they used the confusion of battle to slip between enemy formations. They evacuated Aeliorian soldiers, moving them from the surrounded position to safety. They did not fight in straight lines or use traditional tactics. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles instead of breaking through them. Simultaneously, human engineering teams on other ships did something unusual. They took standard materials that no one else had thought to use as defensive barriers and combined them in new ways. They created makeshift shields that confused Zen targeting systems. They broadcast false sensor readings that made the Zen overestimate the number of human ships involved. The rescue operation took 5 hours. By the end, they had evacuated nearly 3,000 Aeolian soldiers. The human ships sustained damage, and 73 human personnel died in the operation. But the Aeolian battle group was saved. The Concordate Alliance had not lost one of its major military forces. The battle continued, but something had shifted. The human actions had inspired the other species. The Vren used more unconventional tactics. The Thalasians tried new weapon configurations. The Aeolians began to think beyond their conquest protocols. By the end of the first day, the Zen assault had not succeeded in breaking through the defensive lines. They had failed to achieve their primary objective of reaching Vexthar Prime. The Concordate Alliance had held, and humanity had played a critical role in that holding. When the fighting finally stopped, Minho went to see his grandmother. She was in the civilian observation area of their ship, looking out at the wreckage of the battle. Hundreds of destroyed ships floated in space, some from the Alliance, many more from the Zen Collective. "You fought," Park Minji said. It was not a question. "We did what was necessary," Minho replied. Park Minji turned to look at her grandson. "You did more than what was necessary. You did what was unexpected. That is the true strength I spoke of. You refused the role they gave you. You risked yourselves for others. You found a way that did not exist before." Minho thought about his grandmother's words. She was right. Humanity had not fought like the other species. They had fought like humans, with flexibility, with creativity, with a willingness to sacrifice themselves for their allies. The next morning brought reports from the Alliance Command. They wanted to understand what humanity had done differently. They wanted to learn from human tactics. They wanted to hear from Park Minji about what she had meant when she spoke of a blade too sacred to use. For the first time, humanity was not dismissed as a minor military power. For the first time, the Concordate Alliance was beginning to understand that true strength might not come from advanced weapons or conquest protocols. It might come from something older and stranger, the human capacity to adapt, to sacrifice, and to find answers that no one else could see. The War Council assembled 2 days after the first successful Zen assault. This time, the meeting took place aboard the human command station, which was considered neutral territory. Park Minji was invited to attend as a special advisor. She wore the same blue handbox she always wore, and her ceremonial blade hung at her side. Several alien leaders had asked what role the blade played in human strategy. Park Minji simply said it was her family's history, nothing more. Commander Thrace stood at the center of the council room and addressed the assembled leaders. The Aeolian commander was there, along with the Thalasian Consciousness Hive, the Vren Queen, and representatives from a dozen other species. All of them had come to understand that something important was happening with the humans. "The humans performed an impossible rescue operation," Thrace began. "They moved through the battle in ways our sensors could barely track. They used materials as weapons that we never considered. They thought of solutions that our tactical computers did not generate. I believe we have been approaching this war incorrectly." The Aeolian commander made a sound of disagreement. "Humans got lucky. Luck is not a sustainable military strategy." Park Minji stood up slowly. The room became quiet. When she spoke, her voice carried authority that no one had expected from an elderly woman. "Luck is what you call a solution you do not understand," she said. "My grandson and his people did not get lucky. They fought like humans fight. We have been fighting for survival for 10,000 years on a planet full of dangers. We could never match the strength of the largest animals. We could never match the speed of the fastest creatures. So we became something else. We became creative. We became adaptable. We became willing to try what no one else would try." She paused and looked around the room at each alien species represented there. "You are all strong," she continued. But you are strong in the ways your species has always been strong. The Eleorians are strong in conquest and order. The Thalassians are strong in power and energy. The Vren are strong in unity and coordination. But the Zen Collective has learned to predict these strengths. They have studied you and learned how to counter you. You need something different. You need human thinking. The Thalassian consciousness hive made a sound like 1,000 glass bells chiming. You suggest that we adopt human methods? We are far older than humanity. We have advanced technology that humans could not dream of. Yes, Park Min-ji said simply. And the Zen are destroying you anyway. Perhaps age and advanced technology are not enough. Over the next week, something unprecedented happened. Alien military officers began requesting training from humans. They wanted to understand human tactical thinking. They wanted to learn how to improvise and adapt the way humans did naturally. A young human engineer named Ji Woo was brought into these meetings. She was brilliant, creative, and had been thinking about an impossible problem. If humans were good at improvisation and unconventional thinking, what if they could program artificial intelligence to think the same way? Traditional AI uses algorithms and calculations, Ji Woo explained to the council. The computer makes decisions based on logical analysis of available data. It is very efficient but very predictable. But what if we created AI that was trained to think like humans think? What if it could make intuitive leaps that do not follow logical patterns? An older Thalassian scientist questioned this idea. How can you program something to think irrationally? That makes no sense. It is not irrational, Ji Woo replied. It is a different kind of rationality. Humans often make decisions that the logic cannot fully explain, but those decisions are based on pattern recognition so deep and intuitive that we cannot fully explain the process. We see the answer without understanding why we see it. If I can capture that way of thinking in an AI system, we could create something truly unpredictable. Park Min-ji was listening carefully. When Ji Woo finished explaining, the old woman nodded. This is what I meant by the sacred blade. We do not hold back our knowledge. We give it freely. Even though this knowledge could be used against us, we teach it because the future depends on understanding, not on secrets. The project took 3 months to develop. Ji Woo worked with teams from a dozen different species. They created autonomous drones that operated differently from anything ever built before. These drones made decisions based on human-style intuition rather than algorithmic precision. They did not follow predictable patterns. They adapted in real time to changing situations. They even seemed to learn from experience in ways that did not follow traditional programming logic. When the first test deployment happened, even the builders were not entirely sure how the drones would behave. A medium-sized Zen force was selected as the test target. The human drones were deployed against them. What happened surprised everyone watching. The drones did not fight efficiently by alien standards. Their movements were chaotic. They seemed to waste energy on unnecessary maneuvers. By all traditional analysis, they were fighting poorly. But the Zen could not counter them. The biological neural systems that the Zen used for coordination depended on pattern recognition. When the drones behaved in ways that did not follow patterns, the Zen could not predict what they would do next. The drones disabled Zen ships in unexpected ways. They protected each other through unconventional means. They achieved objectives through methods that made no tactical sense, but somehow worked anyway. When the test ended, the Zen force was neutralized and every single human drone had survived. The other species stared at the results in amazement. This is impossible, the Thalassian consciousness hive said. We have analyzed the data. The drones should not have won. By every calculation, they should have failed. That is why they won, Park Min-ji said. She was sitting in the observation chamber, watching the data with the military leaders. The Zen expected failure. They expected predictable behavior. They expected traditional warfare. Instead, they found something they have never encountered before, an enemy that fights like humans fight. Commander Thrace looked at Park Min-ji with deep respect. You knew this would happen. You knew about the intuition drones before Jiwoo ever designed them. Park Min-ji smiled. I knew that humans could not win by being like other species. I knew that our strength lay in being exactly who we are. The details I did not know, but the principle, yes, I understood. Word of the successful test spread quickly through the Concordate Alliance. Orders came immediately to build more intuition drones. Ships were equipped with the new systems. Human pilots and operators began training alien soldiers in how to work with these unpredictable machines. But more importantly, something changed in how the Alliance thought about warfare. They began to value creativity. They began to accept that unconventional thinking might be more important than advanced technology. They began to understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon is one that no one can predict. The war was far from over. The Zen Collective was vast and still had millions of ships. But for the first time, the Alliance believed that victory was possible. And for the first time, humanity was no longer a minor military power to be used for support duties. Humanity was the key to survival itself. Park Min-ji sat in her quarters that evening and held her family's ceremonial blade. She looked at the ancient metal, marked with the scratches and marks of 7 generations. She thought about her mother and her mother's mother, stretching back through time to ancestors who had fought with these same blades against impossible odds. The blade had never been used in combat, her family said. It was too sacred. But looking at it now, Park Min-ji understood something that very few people in the galaxy could understand. The blade was sacred precisely because her ancestors had been willing to risk it. And humanity had finally risked everything in this war, and in doing so, had become stronger than anyone had ever imagined. 6 months into the war, everything had changed. The Zen Collective had been driven back from 3 systems. They had lost 2 million ships, but they were still attacking, still learning, still adapting. And something else was happening that none of the Alliance leaders had anticipated. Other species were starting to think like humans. Park Min-ji established what became known as the Human Doctrine Academy. It was not a military school in the traditional sense. Instead, it was a place where alien officers came to learn not just human tactics, but human philosophy. They studied human history, art, literature, and music. They learned how humans had survived for thousands of years on a planet full of dangers by learning to think differently. An Eleorian general came to study with Park Min-ji. His name was Vextar, and he was the cousin of Counselor Vex Ashar. He had always believed in conquest protocols and orderly warfare, but after seeing humans win impossible battles, he wanted to understand something deeper. Park Min-ji sat with him in the human garden that had been created aboard the command station. She had requested that earth from Earth be brought to the station so she could grow human plants. The garden was small but filled with life, flowers, vegetables, and trees that reminded her of home. You are trying to make your mind work like a human mind, Park Min-ji said as they sat beneath a cherry blossom tree. But you cannot do this by forcing it. You must allow your mind to be open to new possibilities. You must be willing to fail and learn from failure instead of seeing failure as weakness. Vextar was a massive being with scales that caught the light. He was not comfortable sitting among small earth plants, but he was trying. I do not understand how to think without order. All my life I have arranged my thoughts in logical sequences. Your way seems to me like chaos. It is not chaos, Park Min-ji explained. It is a different kind of order. When my grandson led the rescue operation, he had no detailed plan. He did not know every step he would take, but he had a clear purpose, to save the Eleorian soldiers. With that purpose in his mind, he could make decisions in the moment that seemed chaotic but actually served his goal perfectly. This is how humans think in crisis. We move toward our purpose, and we trust that we will find the way. Throughout the station, similar conversations were happening. Thalasian energy weapons specialists were learning to accept that sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones that seemed wasteful. Vren soldiers were learning that individual initiative, not just hive mind coordination, could lead to unexpected victories. Traders from neutral species were asking to learn human philosophy so they could understand what was happening. Then came an order that shook the entire alliance. A Zen fleet had surrounded a human colony world called Kepler 442b. The planet had been colonized by humans 300 years ago. It was home to 2 million people, men, women, and children. Military analysis was clear. Without a rescue operation, the colony would be destroyed within weeks. But a rescue operation would be extremely difficult. The Zen had already demonstrated their ability to counter large-scale military attacks. Traditional warfare would not save the colony. And more importantly, by the time any military force could reach Kepler 442b, it might be too late anyway. Minho was assigned to coordinate the rescue strategy. He worked with Commander Thrace and a team of military analysts from several species. They reviewed every option. None of them looked promising. The colony's population was too large. The Zen blockade was too strong. Traditional military solutions would fail. Then Minho made a decision that surprised everyone. He requested his grandmother's advice, not as a military strategist, but as a philosopher. Park Min-ji listened to the situation. She stood at the observation window and looked out at the stars. Finally, she spoke. The Zen expect you to fight like soldiers. They expect you to fight like warriors. But the colony has something that a military force cannot bring. They have culture. They have history. They have meaning. Minho did not understand at first, but his grandmother continued speaking. Tell the colony to be ready for something different. Not a military defense, but a cultural defense. Broadcast human music into space. Send human stories to every Zen soldier. Send human poetry, human philosophy, human images of love and family and beauty. The Zen have learned to counter our weapons, but they have never encountered something like this. It was a desperate plan, almost certainly to fail. But it was the only plan left. The colony prepared. Every person on Kepler 442b contributed something. Musicians played classical pieces and traditional Korean music. Writers and scholars shared humanity's greatest thoughts. Artists sent images of human beauty and human connection. Children recorded messages to the Zen, simple messages saying that they wanted to live, that they wanted peace, that they did not understand why they should die. All of this was broadcast toward the Zen fleet surrounding the planet. For 3 days, nothing happened. The Zen blockade did not break. But something changed in the Zen soldiers. For the first time, they encountered something that was not a weapon. They encountered humanity itself, not as an enemy to be defeated, but as a species to be understood. Some of the Zen soldiers hesitated. They had never hesitated before. In the collective consciousness of the Zen, hesitation was a weakness to be eliminated. But in those moments of hesitation, something was breaking. Their unity was fracturing, and that moment of fracture was all that was needed. Human military forces broke through the blockade. By the time the Zen realized what was happening, the rescue operation was already succeeding. Ships began evacuating the colony's population. Not all of them could be saved. Thousands had to stay temporarily, but the siege had been broken by something no one had expected, the power of human culture and human meaning. When the evacuated colonists reached the command station, they were treated as heroes. They had not fought with weapons. They had not trained as soldiers. But they had participated in an act of resistance that changed the course of the war. Park Min-ji met with some of the evacuated colonists. especially the children. They asked her questions about why the Zen had paused. She tried to explain something that even she did not fully understand. The Zen are biological weapons created by a creator species to be perfect soldiers, Park Min-ji said. But they were never created to encounter meaning and beauty. Your music and your stories reached into something in them that they did not know existed. For a moment, they were not perfect weapons. For a moment, they were something more complex. The effect of the Kepler 442b evacuation spread through the Concordat alliance like a transforming force. Military officers began to understand that humanity's greatest strength was not in better weapons, but in different thinking. The Zen collective, which had seemed invincible, suddenly had an exposed weakness. They could adapt to any weapon system, but they could not adapt to meaning and purpose the way humans could. The war began to turn decisively in the Alliance's favor, not because the Alliance had superior weapons, but because the Alliance had finally understood something that Park Min-ji had been trying to teach them from the beginning. True strength comes not from power, but from being willing to risk what is most sacred. And every day, alien soldiers and officers continued to come to Park Min-ji's garden, seeking to understand this principle more deeply. They sat beneath cherry blossom trees on a command station floating in space, and they learned what humans had always known, that survival is not the highest goal. Meaning and purpose are the highest goals. And when you fight for something that matters, you become unbreakable. The final battle would be fought above Vexthar Prime itself. The Zen collective, understanding that they were losing, decided to make one last desperate assault. They assembled everything they had left, their remaining military forces, their experimental weapons, their elite soldiers. If they could destroy the capital of the Concordat, they believed they could break the Alliance's will to fight. Minho stood in the command center and looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching Zen forces. The numbers were overwhelming. Over 100,000 ships, billions of Zen soldiers. By every calculation, the Alliance's defensive forces were insufficient. Many of the military officers were already preparing evacuation protocols. But Minho had a different order. He called all available forces to defensive positions around Vexthar Prime. He called upon reserves that other commanders said should be held back for a final retreat. He requested every civilian who was willing to serve in non-combat roles. He authorized the use of every resource the Alliance had. When his commanders questioned his decisions, he simply said, "My grandmother taught me that sometimes you must risk everything to preserve everything." Park Min-ji was brought to the command center for the battle. She was very old now, over 105 years old. But her mind was clear, and her presence seemed to strengthen everyone around her. She sat quietly in a side chamber, watching the battle unfold on the displays. Minho made one more request. He asked all human soldiers, all those willing to fight for the Alliance and for each other, to draw their families' ceremonial blades. Hundreds of human soldiers removed their blades from their homes and quarters. These blades had not been made for combat for hundreds of years, but they had never been made of ordinary metal. They had always been made of something stronger, the determination and the history of human families. When the Zen fleet arrived, they came in a perfect formation. But they did not account for the defensive strategies that Minho had prepared. He had learned from 6 months of fighting the Zen. He knew their patterns, he knew their strengths, and more importantly, he knew their weaknesses. The human defense was not based on overwhelming force. It was based on unconventional positioning and unpredictable responses. When the Zen attacked from one direction, the Alliance fell back in a way that created a trap. When the Zen concentrated their forces in one area, human fighters attacked from unexpected angles. The battle lasted for 14 hours. The Alliance took terrible casualties. Thousands of ships were destroyed. Billions of soldiers and sailors died. But with each passing hour, the Zen assault became less coordinated. The hive mind consciousness that was their greatest strength began to fracture under the constant, unpredictable pressure. Minho made a controversial decision. Instead of trying to destroy the Zen fleet completely, he ordered his forces to disable and capture Zen ships when possible. It was inefficient. It was risky. But it opened a path to something that had never been possible before: negotiation. The Zen, faced with continuous losses and a breaking command structure, began to weaken. Some ships stopped attacking. Some commanders considered surrender. For the first time in their existence, the Zen collective was fragmenting. At the height of the battle, Minho left the command center. He walked to where his grandmother was sitting. He carried his family's ceremonial blade. "Grandmother," he said, "I need you to understand something. We are winning, but many more will die. Some of those people would be alive if we fought less carefully and more destructively. I am choosing to save Zen lives when I could choose to take them. Am I making a mistake?" Park Minji looked at her grandson for a long moment. Then she slowly stood up. With great difficulty, she removed her ceremonial blade from its scabbard. The ancient metal caught the light. This blade had been in her family for 7 generations. It had never been used in combat, never drawn in anger. But it had been preserved. It had survived. It had been passed down because it meant something. A blade that is too sacred to use is a blade that has no purpose, Park Minji said. She handed the blade to her grandson. "Use this, not to kill, but to show that we are willing to use what we treasure most. Show the Zen that we value them more than our weapons. Show them that we are not trying to destroy them, but to save them." Minho carried his grandmother's blade back to the command center. He displayed it on the communications channel, showing every Zen commander what he carried. And he broadcast a message that echoed across the Zen fleet. "I carry the sacred blade of my ancestors," he said. "This blade has survived for 7 generations. It has never been used in combat because it is too sacred to use. But today, I am willing to risk it, not to destroy you, but to show you that we are serious about finding another way. Surrender now, and you will be treated with honor. Continue fighting, and you will fall." Something shifted in the Zen consciousness. For millions of years, they had been biological weapons designed to conquer and destroy. They had never encountered an enemy who offered them mercy while holding the most sacred object of their people. The first Zen commander surrendered, then another, then entire ships began to stand down. The coordinated assault became chaos as the unity of the hive mind broke apart. Some Zen continued to fight, but the organized defense had collapsed. By the end of the battle, the Alliance had won. Not completely. They had not destroyed the Zen collective, but they had won. The massive assault on Vexthar Prime had failed. The Zen fleet was broken. The war was effectively over. When the last shots were fired and the smoke of battle began to clear, the ships around Vexthar Prime displayed the scars of the greatest battle in galactic history. Thousands of destroyed vessels floated in space. Millions had died. But the Alliance still stood. Minho walked through the corridors of the command station in exhaustion. Around him, military personnel cheered. They had won. Against impossible odds, they had won. He found his grandmother in the medical bay. The effort of the battle had taken its toll on her ancient body. She was lying in a recovery bed, breathing slowly but steadily. "You did well," she said when she saw him approach. "You risked the sacred blade. You were willing to lose it to save something greater." "But we did not lose it," Minho said, holding the blade carefully. "We still have it." "Yes," Park Minji agreed. "And that is the greatest gift of all. We were willing to risk it, and the universe allowed us to keep it. This is the true meaning of sacred. Not something you hide and protect from danger. something you are brave enough to use when it matters most. Outside, the Zen forces that had surrendered were being taken into custody. But they would not be executed or enslaved. The Alliance would try something different. They would try to understand them, to give them a choice about what they wanted to become. It was a risky choice. But humanity had taught the galaxy that sometimes the most risky choices were the only ones worth making. The final chapter of the war was not yet written, but the outcome was certain. Humanity had come to a backwater corner of the galaxy as a minor military power. They would leave as the species that had shown everyone else how to truly be strong. 1 year after the final battle, the Galactic Concordat was being rebuilt with new principles. The old ways of thinking about military power and conquest were slowly being replaced with something different, something inspired by human philosophy and human ways of thinking. Park Min-ji was offered the position of chief philosopher of the Concordat. She turned it down. Instead, she requested to return to Earth. She had spent more than a year in space, and though her body still lived, her heart wanted to go home. Minho went with her. As they approached Earth from orbit, he looked at the blue planet below and felt something he had not expected to feel. He felt like he was returning to a place he had never been, though he had been born here. Space had changed him. War had changed him. But now, returning to Earth with his grandmother, he felt like he was returning to the source of something important. Earth was different now, too. The rest of the galaxy knew about humanity's role in the final victory. Young people from every corner of the known universe came to Earth to study. They came to learn not about human military tactics or human technology, but about human history and human philosophy. They came to understand what made humans different. Park Min-ji established a school in Korea, in the region where her family had lived for hundreds of years. It was not a military academy. It was not a science school. It was a place where young students from Earth and from across the galaxy came to learn about human culture. They studied literature and art. They studied history and philosophy. They studied music and the way humans had learned to find meaning in a difficult universe. The ceremonial blade that Park Min-ji had carried into battle was placed in a museum in Seoul, the capital of Korea. It was displayed with a simple plaque that explained its history. The plaque read, "This blade belonged to Park Min-ji of the 7th generation. It was considered too sacred to use in combat, yet she wielded it daily in humanity's greatest battle. True strength comes not from hoarding what is sacred, but from being willing to risk it for the survival of others." Minho was offered a position as Supreme Commander of the Concordat's defense forces. It was one of the most powerful positions in the galaxy, but he turned it down. Instead, he recommended that leadership be shared among multiple species, with humans serving as strategic advisors and teachers. This decision became known as the human principle. It stated that power was not something to be seized and held, but something to be shared and distributed. It stated that true victory came not from domination, but from helping others become stronger. It became the foundation for a new kind of government that the Galactic Concordat had never seen before. Ji-woo, the young engineer who had created the Intuition drones, became the director of the Galactic Technology Institute. But she changed its focus. Instead of developing weapons and tools of war, the Institute focused on creating technologies that helped species understand each other better, communication devices, translation systems, cultural exchange programs. The Institute still developed defensive weapons when necessary, but it focused primarily on tools of understanding rather than tools of destruction. Some of the Zen collective who had surrendered began to change. They asked questions about what they were. For the first time in their existence, they considered whether they wanted to continue being biological weapons or whether they wanted to become something else. It was not an easy transition. Millions of Zen chose to stay as they were, but thousands of others asked for something different. They asked to learn human philosophy, They asked to develop their own cultures and their own values. It was a controversial decision to allow surrendered enemies to choose their own future. Some species argued that the Zen would eventually betray the alliance. Some said humanity was being naive and foolish, but Park Min-ji supported the decision. "You cannot force a species to become good," she said in one of her lectures at the school. "You can only show them a better way and let them choose it. Some will choose poorly, some will make mistakes. But if you take away their choice, you have not actually changed them. You have only enslaved them. We did not defeat the Zen to enslave them. We defeated them to free them." 2 years after the war ended, a Thalasian officer visited Earth. Her name was Lisa, and she came to study under Minho's mentorship. She was a brilliant military strategist who wanted to learn how humans thought about unconventional problems. One day, while walking through Seoul with Minho, Lisa asked him a question that many had been asking. "Why do humans teach us your method so freely? Are you not worried that we might use this knowledge against you someday?" Minho smiled. He brought Lisa to the museum where his grandmother's ceremonial blade was displayed. They stood looking at it for a long moment. "My grandmother taught me that a blade is too sacred to hoard," Minho said. "It is sacred precisely because we are willing to share its wisdom, even knowing it might be used against us someday. That is what gives the blade its true power. Not that it can cut or destroy, but that we trust each other enough to share it." "But what if that trust is broken?" Lisa asked. "Then we will face that challenge when it comes," Minho replied. "But I believe that teaching each other, understanding each other, and sharing our knowledge creates a future where betrayal becomes less likely. A future where we have more reasons to work together than to fight each other." That evening, Minho brought Lisa to his grandmother's school. Park Min-ji was in the gardens, teaching a group of young students from 5 different species about human philosophy and history. They sat in a circle beneath the cherry blossom trees that Min-ji had planted from seeds brought from Earth. She was telling them a story about a family that had lived on Earth thousands of years ago. A family that had valued their ancestors and their history. A family that had learned to survive in a world that was often dangerous and difficult. A family that had passed down not just objects, but values, principles, ways of thinking that made survival possible. "My ancestors had a saying," Park Min-ji told the young students. "They said that the strongest tree is the one with the deepest roots. We humans have deep roots. Our roots reach back through thousands of years of history. Our roots are what make us strong." A young Vren student raised a hand. "But you are young as a spacefaring species. Other species are much older than humans. How can your roots be deeper?" Park Min-ji smiled. "Our roots are deep not because we have existed longer in space, but because we have learned so much about how to survive. Our ancestors survived ice ages and famines. They survived wars and plagues. They learned to think creatively and adapt constantly. These lessons are our deep roots. And now, I am sharing these roots with you, so that your trees can also grow stronger." The students listened carefully. Some of them understood completely. Some of them were still trying to understand. But all of them felt something in her words, a truth about strength that had nothing to do with weapons or power, and everything to do with meaning and purpose. Minho watched his grandmother teach, and he understood what she had been trying to say from the very beginning. The ceremonial blade was never really about a weapon. It was about willingness. Willingness to risk what matters most. Willingness to trust others with your knowledge. Willingness to sacrifice for something greater than yourself. That night, Minho and Lisa sat on the balcony of the school, looking out at the lights of Seoul glowing below them. Somewhere out there in the universe, the Galactic Concordate was being rebuilt according to new principles. Species that had fought for 10,000 years were learning to work together. The Zen collective was slowly transforming into something new, and it had all started because one elderly human woman had carried a sacred blade into battle and shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. "I think I am beginning to understand," Lisa said. "The humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy, but you are the most willing to become stronger together with others." Minho nodded. "That is what my grandmother was teaching us all along. We are strong not because we are invincible, but because we are willing to be vulnerable. We are powerful not because we have the best weapons, but because we have the deepest reasons to fight for each other." Below them, the City of Souls sparkled with lights. In the museum, Park Minji's ceremonial blade rested in its case, its ancient metal still catching the light after 7 generations. It had survived, it had been preserved, and it had finally been used, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a symbol of everything humans could become when they were willing to risk everything for something that mattered. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead. There would be conflicts and misunderstandings. But the Galactic Concordat would face them with a new understanding. They would face them knowing that true strength comes not from conquest, but from connection, not from power, but from principle, not from weapons, but from the willingness to sacrifice what is most sacred for the survival and flourishing of those we love. And across the galaxy, in academies and schools and gathering places, the story of the ceremonial blade would be told. The story of how an elderly human grandmother had taught the galaxy what it meant to be truly strong. The story would live on, just as the blade had lived on, passed from generation to generation. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful things are the ones we are willing to risk losing.